Stroll in the park. I've only been on Reddit for a couple months now, but I've been regularly reading here since I joined. It isn't really as epic as a lot of the stories on here, but it is by far one of the most creepy, frightening moments of my life. This happened roughly 6 years ago, in 2010. I would have been about 26 years old at the time. I live in a town in the mountains of southern Appalachia. If you aren't from this region and that immediately brings to mind visions of poverty and dark hollows, well, they do exist, but the town I am from and still reside in is a university town with roughly 70,000 people. We have a number of public parks, but in recent years the most popular is one of the newest, which was built on the south side of town and has a dog park, in addition to a normal playground type park for children and numerous walking trails, some of which go through wooded areas. The path is lit at night throughout most of the park, and although the gates close at sundown, it isn't uncommon for people to be walking their dogs late at night. I need to describe the layout of the park a little in order for the story to make sense. There is a large parking lot on one end. This is the main entrance of the park, and it's where the children's playground and the dog park are located, as well as the restrooms, etc. This lot is long rather than wide and stretches alongside a sidewalk that runs next to the playground, on the other side of the park, which is to say, over some hills and through some lightly forested areas. There is a small pond and another smaller lot. This lot has a gate, just like the bigger one, but it has a little area before the gate where it is common for people walking at night to park their cars. I had a friend back in those days who was an avid walker. She was a couple of years older than I was, and although petite, was sort of fearless. She would often go walking at night by herself, and her apartment at the time was sort of out in the country, but only a mile or so from this park. So sometimes she would drive out there and walk by herself at night as well. I would say things sometimes like, "Oh, you should be more careful." Because I'm a man who was raised in the South and we are perpetually worried about the females in our lives. She was fairly enlightened and would get angry when I would say things like this. None of this is to say I told you so, I'm just trying to paint a picture. Anyway, long story short, I started meeting her some evenings and walking with her, figuring a bearded 6'1" and 250-pound man would be a deterrent to most creepers. So one night we were walking, and while there were usually a few other people in the park, it wasn't super late, it was just late fall and the nights were starting to come a little quicker. It seems like maybe it was around 8 p.m, but like I said, it's been 6 years. Anyway, I had a rental car that week, luckily as it turned out, because of some of the work being done on my car. I had parked it behind the gate on the wooded side of the park. As we came through the woods and rounded a hill towards the main entrance of the park, I sort of clocked a van in my peripheral vision that was pulling in the gate at the park, which for whatever reason had not yet been closed. The Parks and Rec employees in my town are sort of notorious for not being strict enforcers of the close at sundown rule anyway. The weird thing about this was that it was sort of a cliche creeper van. It was an older model Chevy with no windows in the back, a sort of mottled rust and paint job and dark tinted windows in the front. For a lot of you, depending on where you live, this might already be raising alarms, but in Tennessee that is like every fifth car on the road. As we walked up the sidewalk parallel to the lot, the van turned behind us and then drove slowly past us on our left, coming almost to a stop, and then speeding up to circle around ahead of us at the other end of the lot. At this point, obviously, I was paying closer attention. Now the van came back towards us, and the driver's side window was down. This would be the part where a lot of the naysayers will probably think I'm making this up, because the man staring at us from the van was about the closest thing to a cliche creep I could think of. He was large, bigger than me, with weird aviator-style glasses that may have been sunglasses but were transparent enough that you could still see his eyes. He was wearing a hat and a camo-style coat, and he had a black moustache. He idled not 10 feet from us, just staring at us. We both sort of stopped, stiffened, and looked back at him. There was something about his gaze, some cold-hearted malevolence, the likes of which I haven't really ever felt in my life, which immediately chilled me to the bone. I've read articles about sociopaths and psychopaths where scientists theorise that the reason we feel uneasy in their presence is tied into an ancient biological response from the times when truly we were their prey, and they were alpha predators among human groups and tribes. I felt that in that moment. I felt like I was out in the wild, naked on the tundra, and he was zeroing in on me. It was this feeling more than anything that elevated this moment for me. From merely dealing with a creep of something that was perhaps far more sinister, I grabbed my friend by the arm and said roughly, "Let's go," and started quickly across the field towards the series of hills and trees that were between us and the car, leaving the sidewalk behind. She was sort of shocked at first and followed quickly. We half walked and half ran a few hundred yards before realising that the van had pulled out of the lot behind us and disappeared. My adrenaline was still pumping, and we had a quick conversation, basically consisting of "what in God's name was that?" and "let's get to the car and get out of here." We quickly moved through the woods and started back down the hill. As it descends towards the lot, there were a couple of wide sweeping switchbacks with some trees and shrubs alongside. We crested the hill and could see the lot below, and what we saw there made my blood stop pumping for a moment. Behind my rental car, the Chevy van was parked with its bright lights shining on the car and up the hill a little ways. We hid behind some foliage and watched as he switched his headlights on and off for a minute or two. Then he pulled back a bit and shined his brights further up the hill. He sat there for a long moment as we cursed the fact that we had left our cell phones in the car and tried to decide what to do. Of course, then he abruptly peeled out of the lot and took off down the road, which I did not mention before is a 2-lane country road with not much on it but cow fields and trees. We took off running down the hill towards the car, and we were just outside the ring of trees near the lot when he suddenly swung back in. Luckily, we were near cover and got behind a tree just up the hill from him. Again, he started shining his brights off and on into the trees. At this point, I was thinking I was going to have to attack him or something to try and draw him away long enough for my friend to escape. Fear, adrenaline and anger all converged in me like a dark river, and I was probably seconds away from bursting out from the tree and taking a run at him when he once again peeled out of the lot as fast as he could. We didn't have to tell us twice. We sprinted the remaining distance to the rental car and jumped in. I took off and went about 60 miles per hour down the road until we got into the neighbourhood. I never saw the van on the road. In fact, I didn't see any cars until we got to a main road. I have no idea where he went, if he was sitting somewhere off the road waiting or what. We got back to her apartment and my friend told me that at long last she would accept a can of mace if I wanted to give her one. We had a good laugh at that, but we were desperately shaken. We decompressed and talked it over for a while, and I agreed to contact the police the next day. I went down to the station and told an officer what had happened. I never heard anything else about it. I have no idea what he wanted. We joked that we were 5 minutes away from being turned into lamps, but really I have no idea. Maybe he was just a pervert. Maybe he was a good old boy that just didn't like the idea of people in the park after dark. But that look he gave me when we was idling next to us makes me think that he was pretty lucky to get away. Whatever his intentions, I would surely be glad never to meet him again.